and the most dreadful sufferings would be the consequence of their journey in their present unordered and chiefless array. These feelings for a time were paramount, and, in obedience to them, I accompanied the rest towards Auxerre. We arrived the same night at Villeneuve-la-Guiard, a town at the distance of 4 posts from Fontainebleau. When my companions had retired to rest, and I was left alone to revolve and ruminate upon the intelligence I received of Adrian's situation, another view of the subject presented itself to me. What was I doing? And what was the object of my present movements? Apparently I was to lead this troop of selfish and lawless men toward Switzerland, leaving behind my family and my selected friend, which, subject as they were hourly to the death that threatened to all, I might never see again. Was it not my first duty to assist the Protector, setting an example of attachment and duty? At a crisis such as the one I had reached, it is very difficult to balance nicely opposing interests, and that towards which our inclinations lead us obstinately assumes the appearance of selfishness, even when we meditate a sacrifice. We are easily led at such times to make a compromise of the question, and this was my present resource. I resolved that very night to ride to Versailles. If I found affairs less desperate than I now deemed them, I would return without delay to my troop. I had a vague idea that my arrival at that town would occasion some sensation more or less strong, of which we might profit, for the purpose of leading forward the vacillating multitude. At least no time was to be lost. I visited the stables, I saddled my favourite horse, and vaulting on his back, without giving myself time for further reflection or hesitation, quitted Villeneuve-la-Guiard on my return to Versailles. I was glad to escape from my rebellious troop, and to lose sight for a time of the strife of evil with good, where the former for ever remained triumphant. I was stung almost to madness by my uncertainty concerning the fate of Adrian, and grew reckless of any event, except what might lose or preserve my unequalled friend. With an heavy heart, that sought relief in the rapidity of my course, I rode through the night to Versailles. I spurred my horse, who addressed his free limbs to speed, and tossed his gallant head in pride. The constellations reeled swiftly by, swiftly each tree and stone and landmark fled past my onward career. I bared my head to the rushing wind, which bathed my brow in delightful coolness. As I lost sight of Villeneuve-la-Guiard, I forgot the sad drama of human misery. Methought it was happiness enough to live, sensitive the while of the beauty of the verdure-clad earth, the star-bespangled sky, and the tameless wind that lent animation to the whole. My horse grew tired, and I, forgetful of his fatigue, still as he lagged, cheered him with my voice, and urged him with the spur. He was a gallant animal, and I did not wish to exchange him for any chance beast I might light on, leaving him never to be refound. All night we went forward. In the morning he became sensible that we approached Versailles, to reach which as his home he mustered his flagging strength. The distance we had come was not less than 50 miles, yet he shot down the long boulevard swift as an arrow. Poor fellow, as I dismounted at the gate of the castle, he sunk on his knees, his eyes were covered with a film, he fell on his side, a few gasps inflated his noble chest, and he died. I saw him expire with an anguish, unaccountable even to myself, the spasm that was as wrenching of some limb in agonizing torture, but it was brief as it was intolerable. I forgot him as I swiftly darted through the open portal and up the majestic stairs of this castle of victories. Heard Adrian's voice, O fool! O woman nurtured, effeminate, and contemptible being! I heard his voice, and answered it with convulsive shrieks. I rushed into the hall of Hercules, where he stood surrounded by a crowd, whose eyes, turned in wonder on me, reminded me that on the stage of the world a man must repress such girlish ecstasies. I would have given worlds to have embraced him. I dared not. Half in exhaustion, half voluntarily, I threw myself at my length on the ground. Dare I disclose the truth to the gentle offspring of solitude? I did so, that I might kiss the dear and sacred earth he trod. I found everything in a state of tumult. An emissary of the leader of the elect had been so worked up by his chief, and by his own fanatical creed, as to make an attempt on the life of the protector and preserver of lost mankind. His hand was arrested while in the act of poignarding the Earl. The circumstance had caused the clamour I heard on my arrival at the castle, and the confused assembly of persons that I found assembled in the Salle d'Hercule. Although superstition and demoniac fury had crept among the emigrants, yet several adhered with fidelity to their noble chieftain, and many, whose faith and love had been unhinged by fear, felt all their latent affection rekindled by this detestable attempt. A phalanx of faithful breasts closed round him. The wretch who, although a prisoner and in bonds, vaunted his design and madly claimed the crown of martyrdom, would have been torn to pieces had not his intended victim interposed. Adrian, springing forward, shielded him with his own person, and commanded with energy the submission of his infuriate friends. At this moment I had entered. Discipline and peace were at length restored in the castle, and then Adrian went from house to house, from troop to troop, to soothe the disturbed minds of his followers, and recall them to their ancient obedience. But the fear of immediate death was still rife amongst these survivors of the world's destruction. The horror occasioned by the attempted assassination passed away. Each eye turned towards Paris. Men love a prop so well that they will lean on a pointed poisoned spear, and such was he, the impostor, who, with fear of hell for his scourge, most ravenous wolf, played the driver to a credulous flock. It was a moment of suspense that shook even the resolution of the unyielding friend of man. Adrian for one moment was about to give in, to cease the struggle, and quit, with a few adherents, the deluded crowd, leaving them a miserable prey to their passions, and to the worst tyrant who excited them. But again, after a brief fluctuation of purpose, he resumed his courage and resolves, sustained by the singleness of his purpose, and the untried spirit of benevolence which animated him. At this moment, as an omen of excellent import, his wretched enemy pulled destruction on his head, destroying with his own hands the dominion he had erected. His grand hold upon the minds of men took its rise from the doctrine inculcated by him, that those who believed in and followed him were the remnant to be saved, while all the rest of mankind were marked out for death. Now at the time of the flood the Omnipotent repented him that he had created man, and as then with water, now with the arrows of pestilence, was about to annihilate. Now at the time of the flood the Omnipotent repented him that he had created man, and as then with water, now with the arrows of pestilence, was about to annihilate all, except those who obeyed his decrees promulgated by the ipse dixit prophet. It is impossible to say on what foundations this man built his hopes of being able to carry on such an imposture. It is likely that he was fully aware of the lie which murderous nature might give to his assertions, and believed it to be the cast of a die, whether he should in future ages be reverenced as an inspired delegate from heaven, or be recognized as an impostor by the present dying generation. At any rate, he resolved to keep up the drama to the last act. When, on the first approach of summer, the fatal disease again made its ravages among the followers of Adrian, the impostor exultingly proclaimed the exemption of his own congregation from the universal calamity. He was believed. His followers, hitherto shut up in Paris, now came to Versailles. Mingling with the coward band there assembled, they reviled their admirable leader, and asserted their own superiority and exemption. At length the plague, slow-footed, but sure in her noiseless advance, destroyed the illusion, invading the congregation of the elect, and showering promiscuous death among them. Their leader endeavoured to conceal this event. He had a few followers, who, admitted into the arcana of his wickedness, could help him in the execution of his nefarious designs. Those who sickened were immediately and quietly withdrawn, the cord and a midnight grave disposed of them for ever, while some plausible excuse was given for their absence. At last a female, whose maternal vigilance subdued even the effects of the narcotics administered to her, became a witness of their murderous designs on her only child. Mad with horror, she would have burst among her deluded fellow victims, and, wildly shrieking, have awaked the dull ear of night with the history of the fiend-like crime, when the impostor, in his last act of rage and desperation, plunged a poignard in her bosom. Thus wounded to death, her garments dripping with her own life-blood, bearing her strangled infant in her arms, beautiful and young as she was, Juliet, for it was she, denounced to the host of deceived believers the wickedness of their leader. He saw the aghast looks of her auditors, changing from horror to fury. The names of those already sacrificed were echoed by their relatives, now assured of their loss. The wretch, with that energy of purpose which had borne him thus far in his guilty career, saw his danger, and resolved to evade the worst forms of it. He rushed on one of the foremost, seized a pistol from his girdle, and his loud laugh of derision mingled with the report of the weapon with which he destroyed himself. They left his miserable remains even where they lay. they placed the corpse of poor Juliet and her babe upon a bier, and all, with